Um, who's got the dog?
Oh, I'm gonna put that on mute.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I had an online a Zoom arbitration hearing, and the other lawyer's dog would not stop barking. It was pretty funny. So she had to mute, so she could never get her objections in on time. It's a sad profession, but it has its moments. So pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20B, following Governor Baker's declaration of a state of emergency in the Commonwealth arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, the committee will meet virtually utilizing technology. All votes will be taken by a roll call. We are called to order. Our first order of business is the warrant article relating to the sewer department. Can somebody remind me? I just don't have my list in front of me. Who was Mary? You're your hand is up.
I am the liaison, but I think we need to do a roll call for attendance.
Oh, do we? Oh, of course we do. Thank you. I'm glad somebody knows how to do this. Okay, so in terms of attendance, please answer when I call your name. Gina Sino is not here. Fran Collins.
Present.
Jean Healy.
Present.
Lee Jenkins.
Present.
Lean Lieb.
Present.
Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
Meg Wheeler.
Present.
And Rob Hillman is present. So thank you. So our first order of business is a warrant article review for the sewer department article. Chris, what number is that article in our current draft warrant?
Hold on, there's actually two. There's the rate increase, which is one article. Hold on, I believe that's Article 2, and then the budget is Article 5. I'm sorry, it's 4. So the sewer rate increase is Article 4, and the operating budget's 5. So it would be both of those.
Okay, and who, Mary, were you the sewer department liaison?
Meg and I are the liaisons for water and sewer, and I was able to attend the last couple sewer meetings, and Meg was able to attend this week's. So I think probably the best thing to do, Rob, if you agree, would be for I don't know if Don or Bill wants to lead it off, but at some point, just a little backstory on why the rate increased this year, and then just overall, we certainly have had updates over the months about how the sewer enterprise fund is doing, but just a general snapshot of that.
Okay, which of the two articles would you suggest we do first? The operating budget or the rate restructuring? It seemed, well, I'll defer to you. What do you think?
I would defer to Don.
Mary, can you send to Big Red 8487 the sewer thing, the stuff?
And I'm very surprised because Don, you sent it to everybody.
I've been sending it to you and Rob.
Okay, and I forwarded, but apparently I forwarded the water information twice and not the sewer.
Okay.
Yeah, but I won't get it. I won't get it where I am at .org. So if you could send it to my other email, Big Red 8487, I
Sure.
appreciate that. Gmail.
I'll forward those right now.
And I
Thank you so
apologize
much.
if I asked this before, Mary, but would you, when I send stuff out like this, should I just send it to the entire board? I've been just.
I don't, if it's easy for you, that's great.
Okay.
If not, I don't mind doing it. You just let me know.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But if you could share your screen with the information since folks didn't receive it, that would be great.
Ooh. All right.
Or Chris, do you have it handy?
Yeah, give me just a second.
So, but to answer your question, you have to review the rate study and have that discussion because that article is going to be before the budget. So that would need to be approved before the budget as being presented would be approved.
I remembered there was a right order to do these in, but I didn't remember which one.
Right,
So,
and that's why you see on the article sewer and then water, because both of them are looking for rate restructuring.
okay, well, I think when we're ready with the presentations, we can probably take in the information in the way that the presenters think is the most efficient, and then we can parse our questions and have our discussion as we think is most efficient. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start with Don or with Bill? What do we think is best?
I'm ready to fire away.
Then the floor is yours.
Excellent. So, first of all, thank you for this. I think if everyone has the document, if it's been shared with you, and if it hasn't, what I'd like to do is go through basically the reasoning that we have formulated for a rate increase. And we are looking to go up 10%. And that is a rate increase from basically $9.51 per cubic foot per 100 to $10.46. I'm going to just go through some of the pieces here so that you can get the there it is. If we did the other page, Chris, right there, the bottom of the page, basically tells you what's been going on to a certain extent. So we have not adjusted our rates since 2017, fiscal year 2017. We are looking to go up 10% to the 951 to 1046. That's per 100 cubic foot of material. We have in the last 2.5 years, 3 years, we have changed our operating, the company that operates it. We're now operating our plant, excuse me. It's now Woodard and Curran. It used to be a firm called Suez that was affiliated with General Electric. That cost in and of itself for those 3 years has gone up about $5,500 per month. And the electricity has gone up. It shouldn't be 17, it should be 7, it should be close to 17%. One of the things that we had to go through and sort of do a post-mortem on with respect to the sewer rates that were, or excuse me, the operating rates that were being charged by Suez, is that they had electricity built into their rate. And that at the end of the year, they would true it up at about $100,000 cost to the town. And that frankly is one of the reasons they're not our operator anymore, because we really couldn't, we just didn't like the way that they were doing that. We have hired a new operator, Woodard and Curran. They have gone up, X% from the past operator in cost, but their ability to do things and their ability to service this town has gone up about 150%. They're doing things that the other operator never even considered doing or would refuse to do, even though it was in their contract, which is why we're not talking to them anymore. As is listed here, we have not asked for a rate increase since 17. Our electricity rates have gone up crazy, and one of the things that we're looking at right now is it's just costing us more to operate. Just everything from materials that we buy, chemicals are costing more. And if we went down to, Chris, if we could go to the slide down to the bottom that shows the rates of the towns below. We did do a rate study so that we could have a benchmark as to where we are with our surrounding towns. And as you can see, these are our base fees that we charge for quarterly usage. And then the usage fee is per 100 cubic feet. And you can see $9.51 for ourselves to $12.36 for Hingham. Hull is $15.05, and I believe that's going to go up another 7% this year. And Situate is $5.24, but they don't have the same, their sewer system is not as robust as ours. The other piece I would say to this is that in the last year, the volumes that we're taking in are higher because of COVID, because everyone's staying home. And it's about 9%, 10%. So, we just came to the point of saying, okay, we had to balance a budget, and to do that, we needed a 10% rate increase. I can tell you that I'm not somebody who wants to go to a cost of living increase, because I don't believe in raising the rates if there's no need to raise rates. In this case, there is, and that's the short story on raising rates. I can give you some other background as to capital if you want to get into that, but if you want to just stay into rates right now, I can open it up to, you can open it up to questions.
Fran?
Yeah, where do you dispose of your sludge? Yes, you have to have a thickener of it, right?
Last I heard, it was going to Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. So it doesn't go to MWRA then, huh?
So they have a couple, depending on how much there is. It sometimes goes there, but if we have, so either Rosano Davis or I'm trying to think of the other group that they use, water or something, they will take it to Rhode Island. They have a contract with them there.
All right, but we have to thicken that sludge before we transport it. I thought it would just took the water and transported it as is. I'm just asking a question.
No, so basically we have to we have to remove the sludge from the stuff, and the sludge thickener that we have right now is being held together with Band-Aids and peanut butter, and we need to respond. We need to fix it. We need to really replace it.
Okay, I thought we just pumped the sludge out as it was developed from the process and off it went, but you actually basically separate the water from the sludge.
Yes.
I get it. All right, thank you. I get it. Thank you.
Lee, then Mary, and then Jean.
Bill, is the plant running more efficiently than it was before with the new snakes, what do you call it, tubes?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. One of the things that we did 9 years ago as part of our enterprise and capital fund was to put about $100,000 a year into it, which meant that we had a balance that we actually paid for the two membranes when they died. One had a catastrophic failure right after Thanksgiving. The other one died right in January. They were 11 and a half years old, 12 years old, and they have a useful life of 10 years old. So we got a year and a half at least out of each one of them. And then they died. So we've replaced both of them. Both are, knock on wood, they're working spectacularly. They are requiring more air, which, and one of the reasons that we have replaced a few things. So we originally budgeted something close to $1 million to replace the membranes, the two membranes. We were lucky it came into, and I'll make the number up because I can't remember it, but it'll say 950, actually $1.1 million, I think. And Don, you may know the numbers, but we had about $170,000, $150,000 left over. We were allowed, that gave us, we could buy some blowers, we could buy the SCADA system that we had. And so we were able to, with what we had been banking for the past 11 and a half years, we were able to replace other items. So we're actually in a good position right now, knock on wood.
Mary, then Jean.
So just a couple things, just so the rest of the committee understands that the operator now for the sewer plant is the same operator that we have for the water treatment plant, which I would guess there are some benefits to that, Bill, that you could probably speak to. But the other thing was, in looking at kind of the snapshot, it doesn't seem that your anticipated capital needs in the next 2, 3, 4 years are that great. It seems like they're not nothing, but do you feel fairly confident about where the plant is now that the membranes have been replaced and the SCADA system is in and so forth?
Yes and no. The SCADA, the membranes and the SCADA system are certainly the heart and the venous system of our operating system. We've never had a SCADA system. It was a real pain to try to figure out remotely what was in our wet well, how our blowers were going, how our membranes were actually processing stuff. And now we have that. The membranes are brand new. They should serve the town for another 10 years. There are other things that we need, like the sludge thickener, and we have a grit screw and some other items. We have and are in the process of putting a 5-year capital plan together with Woodard and Curran, and we've listed, well, let me back up. One of the first things that Woodard and Curran did at our request when they came in is they did a complete capital assessment of the plant. And they looked at every single item. They said, and we listed it as to, is it good, better, is it good, sort of awful, worst, whatever, so that we had an idea of whether we should replace it, fix it, whatever the best course of action was. We have that. I can share it with you guys if you want to see it. We haven't finished it yet because it is kind of a dynamic document, but it basically lists all of the capital items, what Woodard and Curran thinks is their best recommendation of when we should replace it, the priority wise. And if you want, I can share that with you tomorrow morning.
if anyone's interested in it.
Yeah.
Should let, why don't you send it to Mary and Don and me, or Chris and me, and we'll circulate it. There's no harm in people having it in their inbox if they wish to look at it. Jean, you had a question?
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I just had two quick questions. Although I will say I toured the sewer plant last week, which was fascinating and exciting. Very interesting, including how clean the water is when it comes out. Almost.
You can
frightening.
actually drink it if you can hold your nose. you
Yeah, I
can drink it.
passed on that, but Woodard and Curran, when did they first become the contractor? Was that last year or a few years ago?
2 years ago. They've been on for 2 years. We have a 5-year contract with them. And again, I can't say enough about them, and it's a breath of fresh air with these guys.
Okay, and the increase of electricity costs, I suppose I have two questions there. Do you think that is a function of increased usage because of the pandemic with and I realize some of it's related to the transfer of the contracts and figuring out having to pay for those expenses separately as compared to the prior contractor. But I'm wondering how much of this might be a function of increased usage because there's more people home, or is this just, over the last few years, these costs have built up and they're going to continue to build?
Well, they certainly have gone up. I mean, over the past 5 years, they've gone up something like 25%. Now, as far as your question on just because of people are home, there is certainly a piece of that because of the extra stuff that we are processing. I honestly don't know what that number is. I mean, it's probably less than 3 or 4%.
Okay.
Because we're processing this stuff regardless of what the volume is, but it's just a matter of how long we're processing it that influences the electrical usage.
Mary?
Yeah, just one quick question, and this came up in one of the water meetings I was listening into. Is there any, I would imagine your contract cycle with Woodward and Curran is different than the water departments. Is there any way to negotiate those contracts so they're jiving, or no, in the future?
Unfortunately, no. One of the reasons that I wanted to look at when we started considering 5 years ago, looking at another operator, one of the reasons that I thought that Woodard and Curran would be in the best interest of the town is that we could basically have a bundled contract and we could share things. But during our interviews with them, they basically have two separate silos of companies.
Okay.
We could maybe share vehicles, we could maybe share this, but they're pretty much totally independent operating units. And sorry to say, I don't think we could. I will tell you that again, I think they're quite good. We try to, it was unfortunate that we couldn't do some sort of a bundled agreement, but I think that just the way that they have their verticals set up in their business, we just can't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Meg, Jean, Lee.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Rob. Bill, just one quick question. I'm curious, how much or is there buffer in this rate increase to account for increased costs in the next few years if they occur, or is this really just sufficient to cover what you know now? And I'm just trying to avoid being back here in a year or two asking for this again, recognizing that costs may continue to go up.
Yeah, well, they certainly will. They're not going down. And I, as I said earlier, one of the reasons that we did not come before the town to ask for a rate increase was that I don't like to increase if there's no reason to. And this year we just had to do it. We were looking at a way of maybe we put in a cost of living of some sort, like 1.5%, what have you. If you look at a 1.5% to 2% over the years that we haven't done it, we're at the same rate that we are now. So maybe we do something as a 1.5% to 2% that is more palatable to the folks.
Yep.
I think it just Jean and then Lee.
Okay.
It's the order in which I saw hands.
No problem.
Jean, did you have another question?
Yeah, I had a second part on the electricity.
Oh, I'm sorry. I blew past you then, so.
Oh,
go
no,
ahead,
no, no,
please.
that's okay. It was my fault. I forgot. The AEC, I believe, and I can't recall whether it was your budget or the water company, but it strikes me that the sewer plant is too small maybe to benefit from solar panels, but was there any discussion about reducing those electric costs through solar initiatives, which may be picking up over the next few years, given how expensive that appears to be for you?
It was about a 5-minute conversation because we have no place to put them. And given our close proximity to neighbors and, residents of the town, they probably wouldn't, I think we have a pretty good relationship with our neighbors, but I don't think they would like these things up. But we don't have any roof space. So all of our roof space on the main building is basically for our blowers that power the membranes. The only place we could put it on are there's 2 trailers that we use for the laboratory, and where Woodard and Curran has their office, which has on the top of it, if it's a 60-foot, they probably have about 100 square feet, but they're all covered with trees. So we have looked at it. It's just,
I forgot about the blowers on the roof, so that
Yeah.
answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Lee?
A quick question. I think it was similar to Meg's. With your extended 5-year plan, your increase right now of 10%, is that going to be able to help you with your 5-year plan? Or have you got any numbers at all for the 5-year plan, the future?
the 5-year plan is basically our capital plan.
Right.
So no, not really. I mean, if we start putting, what we're going to start talking about soon is rejuvenating our capital funds so that we can replace the membranes at some point, because they're basically the heart of the whole place. So that when they die, we stop operating, period, regardless of grit screws and whatever else we have. So we're going to look at that as a way of, we're going to look at that capital fund to generate money from, to generate enough funds to pay for the capital items we have, and then to also fund our capital fund so that we can go on for years without having to do any kind of a major increase. If that answers your question.
Okay, Helene?
I have a question. Let me just put it on. There you go. Bill, I was wondering, in other towns as small as ours, are they doing any regionalization on dealing with sewer at all? Because these costs are going to continue to go up and up and up. We're going to get a raise in our water, now a raise in our sewer. So more people who use water, the sewer is going to tag along with that even more. I don't know if you have a kind of the increase more depending upon how much water, because that'll be tied into the water. It's just going to balloon up. So a lot of people are going to hopefully maybe eventually get priced out of Cohasset just based on utilities. So what are other towns doing that are small like ours in terms of some form of regionalization? If it isn't actual the plant per se, well, it might be someday, but in some ways.
There has been discussion about regional sewer with Situate and Hull.
Yeah, that's what I was aware of.
Yeah. So those conversations are ongoing. The issue is that Situate really doesn't have the capacity to help us, even though they have a much lower rate. And Hull does have the capacity to help us, but they have a much higher rate. So it's going to have to be a sort of higher level discussion, not for this between sewer boards, but between others, that discusses, really where do we want to go with this? I know from friends of mine who are on the Cape, who were parts of sewer boards in towns of Chatham, that regionalization down there wasn't really working because of just the way that they finance. There are some regionalizations from Barnstable County, but we're certainly open to that. And but it also, once you have more sewer, I mean, to pull the Band-Aid off, you can have more expansion of development in the town. So
I'm not worried too much about that. There's not too many places to vote left. I mean, there are more than people would think, but I just think that we need to really begin to look into it for our future.
We actually have been talking to the town of Hull our board has been talking to the town of Hull for 6 years. Now, we haven't for the last year and a half, given COVID and all that. But
And
prior,
I was thinking, and Bill, I was thinking more of like a regionalization of a sewer plant per se. One plant, you know, for a couple towns or something like that.
yeah, I mean, I suspect you could do that. My only fear, given conversations I've had with other towns, is that you're now at the beck and call of that town. So if the town wants to raise the rates 50%, what are you going to do?
Well, you could have a sewer board that has other towns all part of it, whoever's in, just like we would do with some of the other things that we're involved in. You know, that's not a deal breaker in my mind. But anyway, thank you. You know what I'm thinking. That's all.
Lee and then Fran.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Bill, just a quick question. You talked about Hull. Curran runs Hull. Now, if they had larger capacity, which they have the larger capacity, if they were given more effluent, wouldn't the price go down in theory?
No.
Their problem is it's too small of use for a major plant. Isn't that correct?
No. We have talked to them, as I said, for 6 years. They don't want to charge us anything less than what they're charging their ratepayers within the town of Hull. That's cast in stone. Our argument is that we already have a line to Hull. We're already sending materials to Hull through parts of North Cohasset, so that we don't really need to have the capital surcharge on top of the processing fee. They don't think that way. So, and that's the conversation we've been having, because we could send them a ton if they wanted it, and but it would cost us a lot of money.
I think Fran, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, just to further on what Helene was saying about, if you had a central plant, you obviously have economies of scale. You know, if you have a bunch of little plants, it costs a lot of money to run them. If you had one big plant, that all those monies go into that one big plant, and it ends up costing them less. So I think it's really we should be looking at some regionalization. You know, I'm an old high latitude Yankee, and I like our little lone towns, but you know, in this day and age we live in, we really need to think about some regionalization to achieve some economies, to save everybody some money. You know, and it has to be a local. For instance, the vocational school, we've got people on the boards from all the different towns that are served by it. They don't seem to have a problem, so I don't think it's as big an issue as you might think. Anyway, that's my editorial comment.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so are there any other aspects of the 2 sewer articles that we need to cover? Don, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, you really covered the reason for the rate increase and essentially went through the budget. At the bottom of the snapshot, you do note their capital request for fiscal 22 that will go before the capital budget just for their discussion and vote. But that is not built into here. We actually are going to be using some retained earnings and repurposing prior articles to fund that sludge thickener, rotary sludge thickener device or piece of equipment. But otherwise, you know, Bill really covered everything that I would have discussed.
Okay. Well, we find ourselves with a little bit of time. Chris, in terms of the warrant, I'm not sure that I have I've got the latest one I have. I don't know whether I have the absolute current one. But in terms of, if we were to address the sewer rate restructuring first, which if I recall correctly, Don said that's the order of operations. The version I'm looking at does not have, it has a placeholder article. So do we have text on which to vote?
No. I mean, text can be created. I don't think it's that complicated, but I don't have anything for it.
Okay. I mean, my inclination, and I'm happy for other people's thoughts about this, is I generally, you vote for something that has writing on paper. We could get a sense of the meeting, whether we could deliberate a little bit about what people's thoughts are about the 10% rate increase, and then we can vote it when we have a text to vote, or if somebody thinks we could vote take a generalized vote on a 10% rate increase subject to reviewing language, we could do that. Does anybody have any thoughts on those alternatives? Okay, neither do I, but why don't we talk a little bit just so we know where we're headed with respect to, if we had an Article 4 in front of us in terms of text for a 4%, strike that, for the 10% increase that Bill described. Do people have thoughts that they'd like to share in terms of deliberation? If that were moved, I saw Mary and then Helene.
Bill, just a quick question, and this is going backwards a little bit, but have you discussed, or is there anything in that 5-year capital plan that you guys have been working on that would go towards any efficiencies in the plant in terms of energy use?
I don't have it with me, so I can't answer that, but I could certainly send you a mail tomorrow with that. I know that we had a grant to add LED lighting to the plant. One of the things that we're trying to do is to update the blowers to reduce humidity in the plant, which will cause a general reduction in power and things of that nature. But I certainly can, if you give me a day, I can answer that question.
Okay, and then has alternative energy been a part of your conversations at all, just to give some other ideas about potential options for that?
If you're talking like solar power, that kind of thing?
Well, obviously solar is very challenging. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not going to give you much on top of the 2 trailers there, but no, more in line with the LED lighting, so forth.
Most of our stuff, I mean, we have a very limited space, so LED lighting is kind of I mean, we did put that in, but the majority of our stuff is pretty, thirsty in the electricity side of things. And it's more, we'd be better off if we had, lower rates or some way of having a solar farm nearby. And I don't, it'd be nice if we could use the marsh area to do that, but we certainly can't. But
No.
Be bringing that up.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Helene, I'm sorry, you had your hand up before.
Part of my question was going to be, or one of the two, was exactly what Mary asked. And just dovetailing on that, I did some research, but it's really hard for me, Bill, to understand. Being a psychologist, I don't have your headset in sewage treatment and things like that. But I wonder if we need to think ahead down the line about what Mary also suggested, some green technology in dealing with sewer. I know that, I was reading about some interesting options that some towns are exploring. There are new techniques out there that are much cost effective and lower in energy consumption. Are we thinking ahead about the future in that way?
In a word, no. And mainly it's because of the constraints that we have on where our plant is sited. Can't do a whole lot with what we have. If we were to move our plant to an area that had a large, like say, field of grass, one of the things that the EPA is asking us to do is to, instead of doing harbor water discharge, is to actually spray effluent, and it's clean, onto an areable field, and then the groundwater, to replace groundwater.
Yeah, that's what Bill, that's interesting you mentioned that, because in my reading, last night. That's what I was reading about, this grassy area type of thing.
Yeah.
I just was a little confused about like how to do it. Was it going to affect, the groundwater and all kinds of things like that? I'm not an environmental chemist. I called my son and he helped a little, but he didn't answer enough questions. His breath is no longer like, it's not, it was out of his wheelhouse. So yeah, those are some things, if indeed we're operating as a town and we feel that our place where the sewer treatment is at is not the best for our future, then we got to be starting to think about that. We don't want to be paying more into a system that its place is no longer working well for us and costing us money.
No, I agree. I mean, right now, given the catchment area that we have with the sewer customers that we have, I think the plan is doing very well.
I agree. I think you're doing a great job with what we have, but what we have, the actual plant, may be in the wrong place for the future.
Perhaps.
Right. So it's just something to put out there.
No, we've been thinking about it, and we've actually been looking at ways that we could actually truck effluent water to some place and then get some sort of a credit or what have you. I don't know the mechanics of it, and have them spread it onto an areable area so they could be, go into groundwater. But I think that would be I think that would be very cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I think the only way to go would that would save us in the long haul would be to put the plant someplace else. But anyway, go on. These are all long-term, not dealing with right here in the now, what you presented. It seems like you've done a great job. What you have, you're dealing with what you have, Bill, not, what you don't. We need to think about in the next few years. And the way our rates compare with the other towns, it makes sense that we were going to have a bit of an uptick in rate.
So, Meg, and go ahead.
Just a quick question, Bill, and I apologize, you may have already said this, but do we have a sense for what this will cost the average household in an increase for the first year?
No, I don't know that. Because it's, some people have, so part of it is that some people just don't use anything. Some people are, I just don't know.
Yeah. From a PR perspective, if we approve it, we may want to try to pull together something. Because I know sometimes these rate increases are scary to folks, but then if we can break it down, it can be a little bit easier to digest.
Jane?
And okay, sorry.
Jane, go ahead. You're muted.
So I agree with Meg. I think that's an important issue, or at least an important number to understand, including for the public, but also along the lines of what Helene was saying, when she was talking about capacity, that reminded me of earlier discussions we've had about the sewer capacity itself and how we're getting close to 80%. And then what happens once we start hitting those marks? Is the 10% increase envisioning us, is the assumption built in is that we don't hit that capacity? I guess I'm wondering if you can talk about how the concerns about hitting capacity are factored into the increase, or maybe whether they're not.
They're not. This is basically for us to process what we do on a daily basis right now.
Okay, so that assumes no additional capacity in terms of the other projects or development that may be out there.
No, I mean, there are a couple of things that are floating out there. I think we could take those on as they get more materialized. But right now, this increase is basically for us to operate as we are set right now.
Okay.
Okay, we're getting past time, so let's focus on sort of the articles we need to vote on. Helene, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just have one more quick question for Bill. Since the sewer, our costs are tied to how much water usage, is that correct? Especially, not the irrigation part, but the drinking water, we should be able to come up with the average price, like in terms of homes, in Cohasset. That shouldn't be that hard because it's all based on the water uses. Is that correct?
Yes, but somebody's going to have to go through and look at every single, home's water usage if you want to get an average. I mean, well, no, we can't. We could do it based on the total amount of
Right.
consumption if you wanted to do it that way and divide it by the number of sewer users. But it won't
Exactly.
be scientific. It'll be just a mathematical sort of equation.
Yes, that's what I came up with. I was trying to do that last night too. So I saw that wouldn't be that difficult. It wouldn't give Meg and Jean exactly what they wanted, but it'd be in the wheelhouse.
All right. So I'm really strongly in favor of voting on some of these things, but again, I just don't, and this is to some extent my own inexperience as chairing this. If we don't have an article in front of us to vote on, I don't see how we vote. So, Chris, when can we expect text for the actual article on the sewer rate? Or am I missing something?
I just took Waters, I modified it and sent it off to Don, Bill, Rod over in council's office, and said, could you please take a look at this and get back to me as soon as possible on language. And it's just one rate bill, right?
Yeah. When do you need it, Chris? Like tomorrow?
Well, yeah, I just sent it out tonight. So as soon as you get it back to me, if the sooner we get it back on their calendar. So
Okay, yeah.
I'll show you a draft that I just created, Rob, but I would rather have it certified by other people.
Oh, I think that makes sense. So I think what we're going to end up doing is next week, we've got the zoning articles coming in at the beginning of the meeting. But I'll talk to Mary and we'll come up with as many things as are ripe to vote on as we can at the end of that meeting. We'll have met on Tuesday with our colleagues on the select board, as well as capital budget and the CPC. So I think we probably should be prepared. We'll talk about this later in the agenda, but just as a preview, we should probably be prepared to vote on the town hall article. We may want to try to get to grips with the zoning articles while they're still fresh. We'll talk about that some more, but my impression of them is that they're not going to stick in your head very long. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in an insulting way. They're very, very complicated. And I think when they're fresh, they're likely to be easier to deliberate about. But and I think we should, with this sewer, the articles for the sewer department. I mean, I found the presentation to me based on sort of the limited necessity of what that commission is trying to do right now in order to stay in business, was compelling. I mean, 10% is, it's a big number, but I thought they made their case. So just informally, does anybody have a different plan for approaching these school articles that they prefer to see, or does that work for you generally? Hearing nothing, I take that as a strong endorsement of management's of the chair's approach. And Bill, thanks very much. Thanks for making the complex clear, and we appreciate good answers to what I thought were really good questions. So if you have anything further to give us, which I think you do, send it along.
I just was going to ask, if you don't mind, one caveat about putting an average rate together. In other business things that I do, when you're asked to put an average rate together, the people who have the lowest usage of, in this case, water that translates to sewer are going to be happy as Larry, but the ones who have a higher one are going to be cranky. So there has to be a way of mitigating that. I can certainly get you an average usage, but we're going to have to. I think there's going to be some language skills thrown in there to tell people how we're doing this. Maybe there might even be a graduated way of doing this so that we have it as under X amount, a median, and then a large amount, something to that effect.
That may make sense. I see Meg's hand, and then we'll try and move on if we can.
Yeah, super fast. I mean, I'm wondering if even if it's a range, because even in my own head, is this going to cost me dollars, hundreds of dollars, like even just getting sort of a sense of the scope of this, I think would be helpful.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you, Bill. So Chris, I think we're ready to move to our next agenda item, which is the water department. The article or articles relating to the water department. Obviously, there's a rate issue, and I know some of us have sat in with a meeting that the water department had with the select board, what's now a few weeks ago, and all this was sort of inchoate. I think it's advanced a little bit, and I understand that there are some very recent sort of changes and amendments. So we're going to want to hear about all of that. We budgeted an hour and 5, and we're actually reasonably close to that, and we don't have a lot at the back end of this meeting, so I think we can give this the time it deserves. So with that, Mary, do you have thoughts about the best way to get these matters presented? Should we let the commission make its presentation and then go on from there, or is there a different way you'd like to do it? Who would you like to hear from first?
I think that makes the more sense. I mean, Lenore's here and Jason is here, and so however you would like to structure the conversation, Chris.
You have Steve Girardi and Lee Jenkins both here, and I think that they posted tonight so they can actually both participate in the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Call their meeting to order, and so they can officially join you officially.
Okay, then I'll let the sewer commissioners call their meeting to order, and then we'll let them present. Thank you very much.
Okay, Leonora Jenkins for the Cohasset Water Commission. I call this meeting to order. What time is it? My is it
7:51.
7:51. Thank you. Do I have a second for that?
You have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, present in our meeting are myself, Chairman Leonora Jenkins, and Vice Chair Stephen Girardi, plus Jason Federico and Don Piat speaking for us. We'd like to begin now. And I think I might be able to answer one question for you about sewer. If they have a 10% raise, and if you have an average household using 2,000 cubic feet, that would be a $19 a quarter raise on the sewer rate. Because I just happen to have my water bill here and I checked it out.
I don't want to sort of dive into a discussion of that right now. Helene, if you have a question that you think will move the ball forward with their presentation, I'm happy to hear it.
She just mentioned that. Do you have it for the other two higher users? No, wait a second. I'm talking about the sewer rate, not our rate, because you had a question about the average.
Yeah, let's let this.
Just thought I clarified
Yeah,
that.
we can talk about it.
But Jason,
let's let the sewer commissioners get back to us with their number. Although certainly input, literally and figuratively, input from the water department is part of that calculus. But let's jump into the water.
I agree.
Presentation
Jason, we'll
now.
start, please.
Lee, go ahead.
You guys want us to go through the presentation that we gave at the selectmen's meeting, or
Okay, I can't hear Jason.
no?
I think it would be helpful if everyone who isn't speaking mutes. I'm hearing a lot of background noise, which is generally me, but it's not this time because I was muting. But yeah, there it is. That helps. Jason, are you had asked about what to present? Go ahead.
Yeah, do you guys want us to represent the presentation that we did on the rate study earlier in whole?
Well, in full fills me with a certain dread. But
well, I can go through it pretty quick.
I think I don't think everybody on the committee, on the advisory committee, has seen it. So unless I'm wrong, I think probably a quick march summary through it would give us a foundation in what we need to do. So yeah, please go ahead. My caveat, I try to be as cooperative a chair as I can, but please, please, please don't read slides at us, assume we're literate. So thanks.
I do my best. I can keep it as brief as possible. Thank you guys for having us here. So the key points of the presentation, discussing the capital recovery charge. We're going to be converting that to a base service charge. The plan is basically driven on a significant capital improvements plan. And then we have increasing water rates to meet the demands of the system as far as costs. We added a third tier of usage, and additionally, we added a second tier that is now going to be applied to the municipal that used to only receive the first tier. So in past plans, it was said that the capital recovery fee was going to go away, but it doesn't really make sense because it doesn't even meet the existing, it doesn't even cover the existing debt. And it didn't include for future capital projects. So that's why we wanted to try and convert it to a base service charge for the future. Capital recovery charge is based on the meters. Then you have your usage charge to use to calculate the bills. But in the end, they all end up going to the same place. So that was the reason to convert it to just a base charge. The reason for the improvements is there's layers of treatment improvements and distribution. Both of these lead to higher quality water, better service, and a reliability of service. This is our 10-year plan that you've seen. The goal is to maintain surface, meet all the current and future regulations. So as you can see, these are all in today's costs. So we have $14 million of treatment and 7.3 in distribution improvements. So the trend of the debt is going down currently, but our operating costs are increasing and material costs are increasing. Our proposed capital expenditures are going up, which leads to an overall increase in cost. So consequently, we need to increase rates by approximately 2.5% per year for the next 5 years to cover those expenditures. A third tier was added. The reason being is to help distribute the load to the people that are using water, more water than the recommendations of the state. The state recommends 65 gallons per capita per day per person. So the average customer in town is about 3,100 cubic feet of water usage. The projected revenue we're going to receive from the third tier of water additional is about $226,000. These are the proposed rates. The effects on the average customer. So the average customer is a 4-person household.
Sorry, could you, that slide went a little bit faster than I
Sure.
could blink. So these are the proposed, this is the proposed rate.
Yep.
Spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if it's too much to take in all at once, if anybody wants to go back and look at it, we'll ask you to bring that slide back up.
That's fine.
Thanks. Carry on.
No problem. Our usage, the average user in town is a 4-person household. Average user per our statistics is 65 gallons per person, which equals 3,100 cubic feet per day, which leads to an $11 per bill increase on your water bill for the average customer. And then I'll leave it open to any questions.
Well, where to start? I saw Jean's hand first.
Hey, Jason.
Hey.
Oh, sorry, Rob. Were you going to say something?
No, we'll see how the questions come in. Well, can I ask a preliminary question just to help shape the dialogue? And that is, can you explain with a little bit clearer, or at least clearer to me, what it is you're looking for? I think the only thing I took away from that is a rate increase of roughly $11 a quarter for an average family, because costs are going. Can you just elaborate on the rates, just the justification of the rate rise, and and we'll get into it. I'm sure other people here have much more sophisticated questions, but I'm just looking for that broader, a bit more of a broader explanation of what it is we're talking about. So Jason, if you want to hand it off to any of your colleagues, feel free
I
to
was just
do
going to
so.
go back to the capital plan. So basically the entire plan is driven mostly by our capital needs for the future. The biggest capital need upcoming is the GAC project plan for the Lily Pond treatment plant. It's slated in the,
Okay, when you say, you need to define terms. When you say the
GAC is an
GAC plan,
activated
what are we talking about?
granular activated carbon. As it was going to say, it's for the removal of THMs as well as PFAS. THMs are a cancer-causing substance that is created in the treatment process, and we are nowhere near the regulatory point where that becomes a problem. But it is slowly increasing over time, and the goal is to eliminate that byproduct of the treatment process. So that project is a $3.6 million capital improvement and will lead to an annual operating cost of approximately $300,000 a year of maintenance of the activated carbon. The activated carbon is basically a giant Brita water filter that'll filter all of the water that comes out of the treatment plant.
Okay, there's a lot packed in there. Maybe I'll just let some people ask some questions and we'll unpack these things an issue at a time. Gene, I'm sorry, you were about to start to ask a question before I went wandering through the conversation. You go ahead.
Hey, Jason. So I had just two questions. At the last select board meeting, when you presented on this, I think it was Corey who brought up a question about if you're in tier 3, but you're in a, let's say, a multifamily property, but as a practical matter, you're in a smaller unit, but you get into tier 3. And so now you have a potentially higher rate increase. I know you guys were going to look into that just to make sure you didn't have small units with really potentially big increases. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that. And then the second question I had was about Linden Ponds. I noticed on the snapshot, it looks like, and I could be wrong, but the prices that we charge Linden Ponds are not going up in terms of rate increases. And so I was wondering if you could help explain that as well, if you don't mind.
So the first question was about the apartments. Apartments and commercial were part of Corey's question.
Yeah.
We did look at that, and the third tier, we've determined since that meeting that the third tier won't be applied to commercial and large residential users, being something like an Avalon. So they would be just beholden to the existing 2-tier system for commercial properties and those apartment complexes. And Linden Ponds does get rate increases. Their rate increases are negotiated in their contract, and they're based on MWRA's rate increases. So every time MWRA increases, our rates to Linden Ponds go up.
I see Lee's hand. Lee, gosh, there's so many Lee Jenkinses on the line. Mrs. Jenkins, please.
Yes, I think if I can give you some historical perspective about this with the higher rate for the apartments. When our last rate study was done, it was determined that we had 300 units in town that were in buildings that had 1 meter. And those buildings were only paying one of what we have as the recovery charge. So a study was done that determined if they paid half of the recovery charge, and with them paying the higher water rate, it would be equivalent to an individual home with the lower water rate paying the entire recovery charge. Do you follow what I just said? Because we were trying to get equity so that all of the users of the water system would have an equal stake in paying for the infrastructure loans. Because that is what the recovery charge is, paying back the infrastructure loans that town meeting voted on.
And one other aspect that we have here is, back in 2013, one of the other water commissioners promised people to have a rate decrease. So in 2013, we decreased our rates 10%, and we have not raised them since 2013, even though now you were looking at your third sewer rate increase since that time. And so right now we have to really start thinking about raising the rates, because we just cannot exist under that decreased rate any longer. We would not be able to meet our expenses.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to that. Helene, you had a question?
Lenora, I understood the explanation, but I think for the people, the residents of Cohasset, especially multi-units, it's too confusing of a way to go. So I like how you're going to do it now by, working it out, what Jason said. It accomplishes the same thing, but I think the fairness part gets lost in translation. So when it's more direct, how Jason was explaining it and how you plan to do it in the future, I think that will be helpful for the average person. They may not, feel they need a doctorate degree to understand it. It's confusing. I really understand, mathematically speaking, Ms. Lenora, your way is the same result, but it's still confusing. Is that okay? Understand what I'm saying?
All right, but we're not really changing what we're doing, except that the apartments won't be paying the tier 3, but they'll still
Correct.
be paying tier 2.
Correct.
And they have a recovery charge.
Correct. But I understood your explanation. It's just hard for some people because they've heard it before to understand and things like that.
Well, I know there are a lot of new people in town who are on these town boards who are not familiar with what we had done in the last rate study.
Totally. I get it. And the second question was more to Jason, in terms of the third tier. So people who are now in the third tier, how much of a raise is it for them? They used to be part, especially the people who now qualify for the third tier, who were part of the second tier when there was only 2 tiers.
It depends upon the amount of water you use. So we have some people that use a significant amount of water. So there are some people that are going to have really high increases, but it's hard to say because it varies on how much irrigation you irrigate. It's what it comes down to. Oh,
so because it's not just the drinking water, it's irrigation is going to be part of it as well.
In the end, the theory behind having the third tier is to try to mitigate and lessen that irrigation demand.
That's what I thought you were trying to do.
So the state has regulations in place on all water supplies in the Commonwealth to try to maintain 65 gallons per capita per day on average for the entire town. We are pretty good at getting there. This year we're up to 67. So then it kicks into some other potential issues for the department that have to mitigate. So the goal is to try and keep at 65 as people. So even if you get to tier 2, tier 2 goes up to 180 gallons per capita per day. So you're still pushing the envelope of it to get up to the highest tier.
Got it. That's a
okay. Hang on. I saw Mr. Jenkins's hand next.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason, my question on these apartments: if I have a 4-unit with 1 meter, I don't get the third tier. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. My question now is, if I have 4 units with 1 meter, I go in and take the 1 meter away and put a meter for each of the units, then I'll pay.
Yes.
So if I take Avalon and instead of 1 meter for 8 units, I put a meter in each unit, then they'll pay.
Yes.
That doesn't make sense.
Because they would never get to the third tier. That's the point. The
My
point is when you have these multiple units and they go through 1 meter, it pushes the entire complex into the third tier. And therefore, on average, the customers end up paying higher than the 2%, 2.5% that the average customer would pay. So that's why we put them in the second tier only.
But that's the owner's prerogative. If you could, we could actually, right in Avalon, we could put meters in every single unit, 220 of them, and they'd all pay the third tier if they ever entered the third tier, just like a homeowner.
But they pretty much never would.
They never would reach the third tier. And also the cost to do that for the department would actually be significant. We'd have to pay for all the meters, pay for the meters to be installed at this point, because they weren't installed during construction. So the payback would be a significantly long period of time if we decided to do that.
They double their fixed cost every month, every quarter. They wouldn't pay $90; they'd pay $180.
I can't fix what happened in the past, Lee. When the units were put in, the water department decided at that time to put a master meter in, and that's what happened. So when I did the calculations on the cost to those units based on a question from the select board, it was determined that it was more onerous to apartments on average the way we had it. The board as a whole decided that they wanted to go with just 2 tiers on those units. That was the board's decision as a whole.
Not a problem, but I don't think that'll stand up in court, but that's all right.
Okay, Helene, I see you, I may have cut you off. Did you have further questions? Other? Mary?
Could you, because I know this.
I didn't finish. Okay, yeah, what I think Jason said was incredibly important. Knowing that our town needs to get on the average of 6, you said 60?
5.
Right, and the only way to get there, one way to get there is stop the over irrigation in our town.
Can I ask about the notion of 60? I mean, if the Commonwealth is shooting for 65 gallons, the 65 number, whatever that metric is, and we're told by the water commissioners that our uniquely expensive water system gives us a side benefit because it's expensive. The expense is driven by surface water. We have lots of surface water. We don't run into water restriction problems the way a lot of our neighboring towns do. Why do we care quite that much? I don't mean to be flip about it. I'm genuinely curious. Is there some sort of a state penalty out there? Fran, I saw your hand.
I was just going to add that at Sea Chips, we make all our water from the ocean. But we have to know how much water we can carry and what our consumption is. And the 65 gallons per day per person is a pretty much standard consumption. That includes cooking, washing, laundry. We don't do much irrigation out at sea, but pretty well covers it.
I think
I don't know
what
plant capacity or something. Go ahead, Mrs. Jenkins.
When I first got on the board, we had DEP come and give us some discussions at the water plant. And they told us that they did a 10-year study. And we were good because we planned ahead when they did their survey in the 60s, and we built the reservoir in the plant. And they did a statewide study, and they determined that most towns weren't thinking ahead like Cohasset was. And they decided so that the towns that didn't have water wouldn't feel bad, that every town had to have 65 gallons per person, and that they would prefer our water go to the ocean for the fish, and we raise our prices for our customers in order to meet our operating needs. And that's how they got to the 65 gallons per person. And if we go over that, we have to start spending money in educating our people and not going over that.
Are there actual regulatory consequences that drive a penalty cost? That's what I'm wondering.
Yes.
The answer yes answers my question. Thank you. Next, somebody, Mary.
Yes, Jason, because I know this has changed a little bit and I wasn't able to, so cute, wasn't able to listen in on the meeting this week. But if you, so that who is eligible and fortunate enough to be in tier 3 has changed a little bit in the last couple weeks. Could you be a little bit more granular about that? And if you had budgeted a certain amount of money for what that population is, and the population shifted, is the same amount of money in that bucket, or who's taken the place of the people you've pushed out?
So we pushed out about $50,000 worth of use estimated by eliminating the commercial and large residential, and added the same amount from the municipal accounts by increasing the municipal accounts to tier 2 usage versus just being in tier 1 usage.
So it's more taxpayer money going to the water company. Is that how that works out?
Basically.
Why would we do that?
Because the people who are the water customers, they have been very upset that they have been maintaining the burden for all of the tax or the town's buildings, whereas the town's buildings are used by all of the town's residents. So I have been getting a lot of comments in the last couple years about why doesn't the town buildings pay the same rate as the regular water customers?
So I'm not really interested in what random people are. I'm not really interested in what random people
No, but
are
I'm just
commenting
saying,
in
but-
passing. I mean, let me finish. You know,
Go ahead.
I get a lot of comments, about water quality issues and people's perception that our water is incredibly expensive. And I'm not, saying that we should drive policy on those sorts of things. But what I am concerned about is, where is the water department short in its accounts that justifies this in a way? I mean, part of our job as the advisory committee is to make a recommendation at town meeting. Part of it also is to help you, whether we recommend your article or not, make the best and most persuasive possible presentation to town meeting by asking the hard, ugly, rude questions to some extent. So it isn't personal. We're helping. We're actually helping. But so the point is, I think you can go to a town meeting and you're going to find people who are very dissatisfied and perhaps unjustifiably so, that they pay a lot of money for water, some of which is not always, sometimes it runs red and sometimes it smells like chlorine. And that's what you're going to hear. And you need, if you're going to make this a persuasive article to us to recommend and a persuasive article for town meeting to approve, you're going to need to really convince people that you need it. And that, what are your retained earnings numbers like? Where are you going to be if you don't get it? And how is this going to be bad for people if you don't get it? And I'm sorry if I hijacked what was an otherwise fairly sophisticated discussion. And if my fellow committee members want to move on to other things, please feel free. But I feel strongly that the rub in this article is that we could end up spending a lot of time at town meeting listening to people complain unless these things are made clear to them and compellingly so. So there's a lot in there. Why don't I let somebody else ask a question? We'll try and sort it out as we go along.
Okay, but one other thing I want to say about this, Rob, remember when I told you in 2013 that we reduced the rates? We also gave the town the tier 1 rate only because there were other financial situations in the town at the time. And this is clearing up now and going forward on a rate that we should have gone on 6 years ago.
That's fine. I hear what you're saying. I don't know whether, I don't see any documents to demonstrate that. I don't see any foundation for it. And I don't see a budget in front of us that the alternative to, the alternative to which is a catastrophe. There's something to the notion of moving the capital recovery fee, which every ratepayer thinks is an actual capital recovery fee, referring to it as a base fee. It's a little Orwellian to change the words, but I think you're probably, unless people disagree, making it more accurate. But because the notion of a capital recovery fee always implied that when the capital was recovered, we would stop paying the fee. I know that's not true, but you got to make this case strongly to town meeting if you have any hope of getting this thing to pass or some variant of it. I saw hands. I should stop talking.
I would just note
Jason,
that
go ahead.
the biggest driving force, like I said, is the GAC, the activated carbon at Lily Pond. As you may know, Elms Meadow is currently offline due to PFAS contamination. And that spiked up pretty quickly over the course of the year. So there's no historic information on PFAS yet at Lily Pond. We've only sampled for 6 months at this point in time. If we were to have an issue with that and or THMs, we'd be doing mailings to the entire town saying the water can cause cancer. So the goal
You did, and it was persuasive. It was very informative. I'd urge you in your public presentations to use as few acronyms as you can, because they begin to blow right past people. But if you say cancer, yeah, people are going to notice. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm editorializing too much.
So in the end, there's two contaminants that the activated carbon will remove. One and most primarily at Lily Pond concern is the THMs. The secondarily is the PFAS. And we don't want to be doing mailings to the entire town saying don't give the water to your young children. That's not the goal. Currently, the water is safe to drink. Elms Meadow is offline, but we don't want that mailing to go out and say the water's being pumped to you still, and it's contaminated.
And one other thing you have to take into consideration now, we have the well field offline. And in the last 6 years only, we made it into a year-round water supply, getting 15% of our daily water from it and 60% of the cost. Now we're getting nothing. And if you take a look at the debt schedule, the cost to rejuvenate that well field will not be paid until 2025. So we have this deficit here that we are dealing with to say we're going to be having to pay for this asset that we can no longer use. So we need to look at all sources of income. And that's why we felt that putting the town in tier 2 was also very important.
Fran first and then Don.
Yeah, I had a question. Have we been looking for PFAS down there at Elms Meadow for a long time, or did we just look and say, oh my God, here it is? And if we have been and it just showed up, do we have any idea where it's coming from? There's no industrial stuff there, and I think most of that area is sewered right now.
So there was an original test, and I have to get my PFAS thing out, and I don't have it on me. There was original testing done that was significantly less accurate than the current requirements. So the federal government was at 70 parts per trillion. That's what we sampled the first time around. We didn't have a hit. Then the DEP ratcheted us down to 20 parts per trillion. We did some sampling in the summer and have been sampling ever since then on the PFAS. We only had one hit above 20. That was when we shut the well field down.
Do we have any idea of the source?
No, we do not.
Okay, one other thing about
hang on, Ms. Jenkins, hold on. Just one follow-up question to Fran's point is there any effort in place to find that source? Because as Mrs. Jenkins points out, and has pointed out in other meetings, that well water is a good deal cheaper than surface water. So getting those assets back online helps everybody.
So we did receive a grant, by the way, to pilot activated carbon at Elms Meadow. It's underway currently. We're hoping to get some results. They have to spend the money by July 1st, so we're going to have some answers on the treatability there. Realistically, finding the source could cost more money than treating the source. You're basically trying to determine the path of a 20 part per trillion contaminant is significant, can be hard. So
that's an ugly fraction, yeah.
So you're putting, basically you have to put wells on all four sides, measure PFAS, is it higher on one side than the other, and then continue to move until you find the source. So it's kind of a needle in a haystack.
Okay, that's a fair answer.
You're going to have to treat anyways. So there is a talk about doing class action lawsuits on the state level. If so, then finding the source could become worthwhile.
Okay, I think I
Okay.
had interrupted Mrs. Jenkins briefly, if you have something to add, and then
Just
Fran, and then
briefly.
Helene.
That well field, we have been trying to stop the neighborhood from dumping there for 10
I know.
years already.
I live here.
No, but the funny thing is, we just got a request from the Department of Agriculture to also test for glycophosphates, which is in products like Roundup. And the items that are being tossed into the well field, instead of going to the town dump, are all types of things like Christmas trees that could be treated with fire retardants, which is a source of PFAS, plus any type of pesticides or herbicides on any treated material from their yard that they're dumping there. And our PFAS high mark came when we had a high water level. So that was not something that's been sitting there for a long time. So if we could have just gotten the people to stop dumping over 10 years, maybe we wouldn't have such a severe problem. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, if it's neither here nor there, let's kind of stay on a thread that gets us through your rate increase request, and then I think we should probably turn to the budget shortly. I saw Fran, and then Helene, and then Meg.
Just my comment is that chemical is a relatively new chemical in our world. It's not something that's been around here for 500 years. So maybe what Leonora is saying is maybe the neighbors dumping the trash over the wall. I mean, that used to be a big field, but now it's all grown into a woods. So
I've spent the last 30 years watching people going down my street with wheelbarrows. There's a lot less of it than there used to be. A lot less. But I always found it deeply irritating for a variety of reasons, less sophisticated than Lenore said.
Well, there are the signs there that say if you see them dumping, call the police.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation.
We got to find out where those PFAS are coming from.
So I think I saw Meg, and then we'll just keep moving. Meg, go ahead.
I was just scratching my ear, but thank you.
Helene.
Let me just turn it on. Okay. Yeah, I just think if we make people aware just educationally, because what Fran said is true. It's only been around since 1940s that we're using products that basically they have stuff in them dealing with carbon and other stuff that are bonding to carbon and in terms of the environmental chemistry of it all. But basically, there's like Teflon and water repellent stuff. And if we educated the people of Cohasset, that would be really helpful in terms of, the danger, because they're around forever. They don't disintegrate. Okay. So that's part of the problem. So I just think there's an educational component here.
Good. Thank you. Fran, and then,
and
then Don.
I'd add one thing.
Last week, Lee mentioned about testing the water up at the dump. And I wonder if they're finding PFAS up at the dump. That'd be interesting, in the landfill.
It would be. All right, so I had Don, and then Mr. Girardi, did I see your hand?
Yeah, he did.
Let's hear from Don, and then you're at the bottom of my screen. I promise I'll look all the way down. So go ahead, Don.
Just quickly, as Jason mentioned, the reduction from tier 3 back down to tier 2 for Avalon and those multi-units. Making up for that, hitting the town and school for tier 2, I just want to put in context what that actually means based on historical usage. And we may get to this later, but I just want to at least glaze over it quickly, or not glaze over it. It's about $70,000. 90% of that is school related. So at this point, that's about $63,000 that we project an additional expense to the school budget, where I have a feeling at this point that budget is already balanced along with the town. So I do want to put that out there as context to what that actually means for putting the town into tier 2, and then in addition to the 2.5% increase, it's an additional $70,000 between town and school. Majority of that hitting the school budget.
Can I ask you a question, Don? Before I'm just proving myself having lied to Mr. Girardi that I'd get to him next, but very, very briefly. So was this proposal unavailable to the school committee when they did their budgeting?
This just was voted on Tuesday.
Okay. Mr. Girardi, you're on. It's all yours. The microphone is yours. And I'm sorry, what's your role in this? We've never met.
Water Commission.
You're one of the commissioners. Thank you. We've never met, so go ahead.
Oh, nice to meet you. So, one of the proponents is public utilities. They have increases year after year. It's a normal trend. One thing I think wasn't mentioned, I got booted off for a sec, but once this GAC system goes in for PFAS remediation and water quality, if Jason can correct my number if I'm wrong, it's an annual maintenance fee of in and around 300,000. Jason, am I right? To maintain a GAC once installed.
Yes.
So we have to be cognizant of that maintenance fee, which is very crucial of keeping that GAC system up and running and maintained properly. So again, we can provide the residents of Cohasset with good quality water and, minimize no PFAS in the water system. So I just wanted to keep that in the back of everybody's minds when they start looking at the rate study, that it is very important.
Thank you. Meg, is that your ear again, or?
I'm not raising my hand.
Your right hand moves and I react.
Sorry.
It's Pavlovian.
Don't worry, you'll know if I want to say something.
Perfect. Thank you. Additional, Mary.
Just to dovetail a little bit on what Dawn brought up. So we have a joint meeting for a school budget presentation shortly coming up. Are they aware of this? Where are they going to find that?
I believe Chris has had a brief conversation with Patrick, more just in passing recently, either yesterday afternoon or today. So I believe he's been made aware of it. To what impact, I think I just got the number today of what that financial impact would be. So I don't think Patrick may have had that $63,000 estimate, but I believe he does understand that there's a potential 5-digit number coming their way.
Well, I mean, it seems that there are a couple of interlocking issues here. I mean, one of them is, is the general rate restructuring justified? Set of arguments, worth a discussion. And then the change in tiers and who goes into the tiers generally, and then the change in tiers and putting government buildings into the tiers and the impact on the current budget cycle. And all that is preface to this question: why is this happening on a Tuesday in late March? It just seems that, we've got a budget development cycle that started back at the beginning of the year. And if there was going to be a suggestion that money, essentially gets moved, tax money gets moved around in the budget, I think there's sort of an independent variable that this is a little late. And then there's another question, I think, and I don't know whether this is for the rate study or the budget, but they're joined at the hip, it seems to me, and that is, what's the sort of, revenue versus burn rate? I mean, what's your retained earnings look like, and is that being, held against future capital expenses, or is it in the same range as the towns? So I'm sorry, I've just asked a grotesquely compound question. An objection would have been sustained, as Jean surely is thinking right now. But so I'm going to kind of throw it open for other folks' questions, and I'll follow up with those notions if no one else finds them interesting. Anybody? Don?
I can answer the question of where we're at with retained earnings.
Okay.
Right now, again, there's a little more discussion that Jason and I with the commissioners will have about using some of those retained earnings for some capital projects. But right now, as it stands, we're at 1.3 million, which is about 26% of the budget. We are having discussions of maybe using about 500 to use for a repurposing of a prior bond authorization for that Elm Street water main. So that would bring it down in line with about 17%, but we definitely have a good surplus that we're working with. And this is really, it's going to be helpful with how heavily driven this rated study was with capital needs. Having the flexibility of retained earnings is going to be very helpful for us year over year. But it's something that we're going to have to actively manage to see if it's more beneficial to pay some things with the retained earnings or cash, and maybe swap out a year where we may have borrowed for something. But I guess in my opinion, we have strong retained earnings, we have a strong budgetary surplus, we budget conservatively. It's just hard for me to swallow, at this late in the game, charging the town $70,000 more. But again, that's not for me to make that decision. I just figured I'd put in my analysis and the answer to some of those questions.
Well,
it is late in the game.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, Don. Are you done? I thought you were done.
That's it.
Okay. I see Mrs. Jenkins' hand.
Okay, now, from our perspective, you have to understand that a decision was made years ago to give the town.
I'm really not interested in
$1
decisions
a
that
year
were made
break,
years
and
ago.
we lost $560,000 over the last several years
Can I-
that the town hasn't been paying this.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt for a second? I've muted you because I asked to interrupt and you talked right over me. I don't think that things recounting from years and years and years ago without them being sort of a foundation, that could have been provided to us really matters that much. You've got your books now, and I'm interested in what I am, and my colleagues may disagree. I'm interested in what they look like now. So if you could sort of keep that in mind when you answer, it would be helpful to us for the decisions we have to make. And now I'm going to turn the floor back over to you. Thank you. There you go.
Okay, now we are in this position right now because after the selectmen's meeting, a question was raised and we were not really in tune that this was going to be a hardship with the commercial and apartment complexes. So in order to figure out how we were going to balance our budget and our rate study, this seemed the logical choice. Since this had been turned over before, so we were just going to go back to what things were prior. And it just seemed like a natural numerical balance, that's all.
Very good. Other comments, questions? Go ahead, Jean, then Helene.
And I apologize if this has been asked and answered, but I understand the large residential use properties have been moved back into tier 1 and 2. My question is with the big commercial users, so I'm not talking about Avalon, I'm talking about pure commercial, no apartments, et cetera. Can you explain a little bit about the movement from tier 3 into tier 2?
The idea was when we looked at the commercial users in total, they were using, their usage was affected in all 4 quarters of their bills, meaning that it's water that they need and not necessarily are excessively using. So the residential users, most of them, the majority of them are only affected in 2 quarters or 1. So the idea of the third tier is to affect that usage and not necessarily affect the commercial properties that need it to wash dishes and or to that effect. So that was the concept behind not applying the rate increase to those users, because it's necessary water for business. It's not a extraordinary use of water.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Helene, and then we'll move toward what's next, I think, unless more members of the committee have more questions. Go ahead.
Jean's question was the same as mine, but the other second part is I agree with Rob and Don. I just don't think the schools to take that hit right now, especially wasn't unplanned and everything like that. They balanced their budget on what they thought, I think we need to explore other avenues, and is there wiggle room, Jason and Lee, that you can delay that so that that there's not a $70,000 hit, or something like that, it coming at them, 60 to 70,000.
You mean like delay it for a year?
Well, work out another structure. So some of these like the municipalities aren't going to have this surprise hit this late in the game. Can you figure out another structure so that it doesn't hit the municipalities that way? Can you look seriously in your
Don?
budget and save 70,000 somehow?
So the 70,000 is what would be made up pushing to tier 2. I believe based on the preliminary numbers that were run for the impact of moving the multi-units in commercial down to tier 2 is only 50,000. Now, I would suggest that 50,000 would be able to be made up within our expenditure lines. We'd have to take a harder look, but it could be done. Not saying it has to be, but that's an option, and just want to make that note.
Anything further? And my point, for what it's worth, is that it's a question that lives in two different levels. I mean, one of them is the budget line, maybe three. One of them is the sort of the immediate budget line requirements and whether the retained earning line is robust enough to take that hit, if indeed it's a hit in the next year. The second one is the fairness point that Mrs. Jenkins raised concerning the pardon me, I was having a coffee delivered. About whether or not, to what extent, who should be paying for the water consumed by the schools. It's just getting paid through different modalities. That's the right word. It's probably not. And then lastly, just a matter of intragovernmental comity, and that is that this is just the wrong time in the budget cycle to look to other departments and say, oh, by the way, here we need to change our internal revenue generation or what have you, and we're going to get it from you. And that might be something that if the answers to questions 1 and 2 are yes, then the answer to 3 may be not now, maybe in a year. And notwithstanding the fact that there are people on this call who know a lot more about the school budget than I do, but I've, in my other life, see a lot of school budget issues in other districts, and this is a weird year, a very weird year. And I'm not sure that this is something that ought to be done to that department. And I'm indifferent really to it being, schools or DPW or police. It's just, it happens to be the schools, but that any other department should get this laid off on them at this late date. That's just my thinking. And with that, other questions or comments? And then are we convinced that we've had an adequate conversation of the rate matter? Should we be turning to the budget for an additional conversation, or did we loop them into each other sufficiently? Fran, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm looking at the budget sheet here, and I noticed that you're looking at almost a $500,000 deficit this year, and you've had surpluses in the previous years. Where did that $500,000 deficit come from?
Fran, excuse me, that's not really a deficit. That's a year-to-date where we are revenue to expense. So as I mentioned, most months when I do our monthly update, that would be heavily driven by the timing of debt service payments.
Okay, I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, they're on a set schedule depending on when they were issued, every 6 months. So depending on when they are, a lot of them are in July, August, September is the first payment. So that's why it's kind of heavily front loaded in the first half of the year or so.
So we don't expect to be running a major deficit in the water department.
Right, well, by the end of the year, I mean, we're gonna be looking just fine. It's just the timing of actual revenues versus actual expenses when they occur.
Yep, thanks.
That's what makes accounting so much fun, right?
Yep, keeps me busy all day, never a dull day.
I want to throw one thing out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
To help the process, and obviously I would need a vote with the water commission, but you know, since the budget for the schools are done, they're all done, correct?
They're pretty much ready to present to advisory, I believe, and have a joint meeting with the select board next week. I think it's next week or the week after, but they're pretty set at this point.
I'm still the newbie on the water commission. Now, I was on the alternative energy for the longest time, but I don't know if it's worth, I haven't talked to the water commission, but is it worth just keeping them in the tier 1 rate for another year and come back, proceed with the rate study going forward and keep the municipals into rate tier 1 and just transfer the 50K into the capital? I don't know. Because we do have capital projects that are really, in need, so.
Yeah, Steve, I think I agree with you that we defer this if we could write it in the rate study, that we defer putting the town on tier 2 until next year. But we are going to be having a really tight budget next year if we do not have the well field online, which is going to, hamper us. And then, with all the work we're doing, as Don would say, looking at our expenditures, I don't know where we could cut because, even take a look, we just had to replace a hydrant on Cedar Street with a valve. And just the detail for that job was $3,300, not counting the cost of what the materials were for the hydrant and the valve and the labor for the subcontractors we had to hire. And that was just a tiny job. And we have these things going on all over town. We had another situation like that on Iron River earlier in the year where we had a massive detail amount. So we have all these other little things that are coming up and people just don't realize what the expenses are, and it would appear to be a very simple job. Yeah. So I just can't see where we can cut expenses.
Again, when I propose that, it would be, you'd have a hard look, but when you look historically, I mean, that's why we budget conservatively, right? We've generated anywhere from 200,000 to 400,000 of expenditure turnbacks in any given year in the last 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, we built this budget based on assumptions, but I mean, you had to sharpen the pencil. I know it could happen. But
can I ask a question, Don? What's the water department's projection in this budget for, its surplus, for a surplus, retained earnings number?
Really, every year that you start off the year, you're balanced. You're proposing a balanced budget. You plan to have some surplus, but it's not really set in stone. I mean, any year you could have, like this year, we've almost been at, I believe, 90% of our use budget collected through February.
Oh, I guess I asked the question wrong because, of course, you project a balanced budget. I guess what I meant to ask was in the current year, so the year that we're in now, what track is the water line for? And is it going to have parentheses around it, or is it going to be net positive?
Oh, I foresee it being a net positive for sure, especially with the increased water use that we've had. I mean, we've had 3 straight quarters that we've been up above prior year. And like I said, I mean, you can just see through 131, which is on this budget sheet I provided, we're through 1.7 of the $2 million that we budgeted. We still have one more quarter of commitments and then 5 more months of collection. So I foresee we're going to have a few $100,000 surplus.
Okay, let me stop you there. So we're having an argument about schwacking the school department for $60,000, and there are going to be 6 or 7 figures in surplus. I'm done. You know, unless the water commissioners, unless I'm getting something fundamentally wrong and somebody tell me something, you know, why that is. I just don't see it.
So
Okay,
if
I can tell you some examples of where this number is coming from. Because we budget conservatively, we never know how much we're going to have in system development. System development means how many new homes are coming online. And, you know, we keep hearing from planning that we're getting close to maximum that we're going to have. And also, don't forget, we are an extremely weather-related business. And if you take a look at what type of summer we had, it was extremely dry. So that's why water usage was going up with irrigation. We could have an extremely wet summer coming up where our water usage is down. If you take a look, you know, where we are, you just never know. And then also this year was a very different year than we've ever had before because people being at home so much and using a lot of water. So this could be an anomaly, if you follow what I'm saying. Next year, it could be like we may not be meeting what we're projecting for sales.
Don, just to clarify a little bit, and then I'll ask, I saw Helene's hand. So if the water department has, let's call it a $900,000 surplus of revenue over cost, that gets characterized as, and pardon my ignorance of the right terminology, does that go into a line called retained earnings?
Technically, it's a whole calculation at the end of the year of your ending balance and fund balance, and then you take out any other commitments. So if you might have had $900,000 surplus, but if you had $400,000 of encumbrances that aren't actually paid yet, but will be paid next year that you're carrying over, really your retained earnings number would be $500,000.
I see.
So but it's a big calculation at year end, and you start with last year's essentially retained earnings, which you have $1.3 million now, maybe going down to 700 depending on what we do with some capital items. But
so I think you might have answered my question, and I'm pretty sure I've asked you this question before, and I just am not retaining it. Well, no pun intended. But so when that, you know, if the 900 becomes 500, you know, actual dollars, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, do those continue to exist in the water department's, you know, bank account?
Yes. So what happens is that 500,000 it's certified by the state. So June 30th numbers are taken, the whole calculation is done. They certify the numbers as of July 1.
Yes.
Those numbers can then be used for appropriation at any subsequent town meeting.
So if we had a special,
if we had something come up as a special, we could use retained earnings for a capital project or anything really.
I see.
You know, again, it's like free cash. So we don't necessarily want to use it for plug-in or balancing a budget necessarily, but really it's more for one-time costs, capital items and things like that.
Okay. All right. I understand that better. So,
okay. One other thing though too, remember how Jason talked about how we were basing our budget on what our capital needs were? The last rate study did the same thing. So they were projecting to have retained earnings so that we could cover the capital projects that we had done. And we did those without going into borrowing. Like when we did that major loop from Main Street to 3A on the Situate line, when we did the rehabilitation of the water tank behind Avalon. And there were a number of projects that we did without going into borrowing because this was built into the last rate study.
But my point is much, much more limited than that, is that none of these capital projects are a surprise that have come up in the last 90 days. And yet there's, a big box of surprise being served up to other town departments because of how the water department wants to do things. And I think I've made it pretty clear where I stand on that. So I'm not gonna beat that horse any further.
Mr. Hellman, I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Girardi.
Since this is a joint session with the Water Commission Advisory, I'm going to make a motion, and with Lee agrees or not, I want to make a motion on about the municipal buildings, if that's okay.
That's your chairman's choice, not mine, but I'm certainly willing to turn on my mute button. And
Sure. Go ahead, Jason.
No, it's Steve.
I'm sorry. Steve.
So Lee, I was going to make a motion to put the municipal buildings back into tier 1, and we'll revisit it next year and we'll keep forward with the rate study. So
I would like to slightly amend that motion to say that we will not put the municipal buildings on tier 1 this year, but put them on tier 2 this year, but put them on tier 2 in our rate study next year. Would that be what you're saying?
No, I would try to go for the tier. I know what you're saying. I would like to see the tier 1.
To have the municipal building, do you want to keep the municipal buildings on tier 1 forever?
No, we'll go for 1 year and revisit next year.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we could do that, Jason, to say revisit unless we put it in the rate study as we were going to be having the municipal buildings on tier 1 for the first year of the rate study, and then for the subsequent years of the rate study, they will be tier 2.
If Steve's saying revisit, you'd revisit it and then submit an article next year to change it if you're going to revisit.
And it'll also give us time. We could do it before the school committee does their budgets.
Well, no, but the thing is, if we're going to revisit, they won't know whether or not we're going to determine whether they will be on it or not. But if we put it in right now to say that they will be on it from tier 2 or year 2 through the end of the rate study, they'll know definitely that they're going to be there. No?
Jason, help me out here.
That's up to you guys.
No, I mean, to revisit to me.
Revisit means it would be not in the rate
discussing
study until
time of
you
the year
bring it
next
to the
year.
rate study again next year at town meeting. So revisit means it's out until you bring it back to the table. So it wouldn't be in by default next year. It would be out permanently until you vote to put it back in.
But then would have to go before town meeting again for an amendment to the rate study next year.
So we would continue forward with our current rate study to town meeting. Then next year we would go back for.
And trying to amend our rate study. Or Rob, you might be able to answer this question. If we put it in that it will go in to the rate study next year as tier 2, do we have to go back to town meeting?
I'm not prepared to offer that level of legal advice on the fly. That's one that I'd walk down the hallway for. But as a matter of policy rather than as a matter of law, I think that from my personal perspective as one of the members of the advisory committee, I think that that it's appropriate to make the case to town meeting for including the municipal buildings, and let town meeting decide and let the other departments weigh in. So, I mean, you make your motion, bring your thing, do your thing, and then our committee will recommend or not recommend as we see fit. But personally, I think Mr. Girardi's first motion that out it goes, come back next year and make the case is how town meeting is supposed to work. Not to kind of, I mean, it feels like a poison pill if it's in now, that it's a self-executing delay, thing next year, which is easier for you. I get that. I don't and that's not pejorative, but it seems to be sort of inconsistent with the finest traditions of New England town meeting government.
No, but I don't understand, because if we have it in the rate study, because we have all these different changes in the rate study with the different groups being eliminated from different tiers. I just don't understand why it cannot be put in and explained at town meeting what we're doing in this rate study.
I think it's your committee's motion to make, and then it's our committee's motion, decision whether we want to support that or not. I would not personally, but I'm, not even primus inter pares. I'm just the guy with the microphone. I see if it's okay with you, Lee, I'll take a couple of comments from my colleagues. You still have a motion on the floor of your meeting, so we should be mindful of that. Helene?
I agree with Rob. I think that the timing is really wrong this year. And I think that the way that the town operates, I think the most effective way is to put it in, like for next year, and to revisit, to have it as a revisit, because things may change in our town between now and next year. There could be changes. Your needs probably will not change, but we have no clue what's going to happen. By the way, when I was just being a little ADHD here, I looked in the Farmer's Almanac. This summer is going to be very dry, so our raw water usage should go up, even though it's La Nina. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's chaos theory and weather prediction. But I do agree with Rob. I think that seems like, the town meeting way to do things. And I think Stephen, what he offered up was a good compromise.
Again, I'll ask Jean for comment if that remains acceptable. Go ahead.
I would just echo Rob and Helene's comments as well. And I think that Stephen's first motion is likely the way to go. I think that there will be consternation on charging the school and the town and linking that to the overall rate study that it sounds like you need to get the capital costs done. And so it might be, just perhaps two separate issues that maybe if disentangled could be handled more effectively. That would be my approach.
Anything else from the advisory committee? And I'll hand it back over to the water commissioners. Okay, Lee, it's your meeting.
Okay, so it looks like the motion on the floor is to eliminate another category from our rate study to bring our rate study down. How is that going to affect you, Jason, in the overall?
We just
Do we have to adjust the budget?
We'd have to at your next meeting adjust the budget by probably $50,000. Like, what did you say, Don? The 70, some amount of money. We'd adjust the budget accordingly at the next meeting.
Yeah, it would be about 50,000. Basically, you're trying to make up the lost revenue for the change from tier 3 to tier 2 for the Avalons and the multi-units and the commercial. So really, it's just that number. It's not 70. It's whatever we're thinking that the decrease from that revenue would have been. And that's just what we'd have to go back and take a look at and adjust.
Sounds like we're at the same number that I was suggesting at the meeting the other day, but. So now we're going to have a problem with the budget. Okay. So it sounds like no one wants to do this. So we will carry Steve's motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So now you are aware that our budget that we have handed you for this evening is a little high, because we made an adjustment already for some decreases. So how do you go forward on this, Rob?
Well, Then I guess, I mean, it really is up to the advisory committee and, I mean, obviously, unless there's further discussion, we should probably move in the direction of our own deliberations on recommendations. But Chris, can I get some input from you in terms of, you know, with these articles, do we have matters on which to vote?
On the water rate, you have a form of an article. It's the attachment that's the critical piece, right? The actual rate chart, which is in flux. So if you have, I don't have that. So if
That,
Okay,
that,
once
that
again,
hasn't changed. The chart itself hasn't changed. So I can share that if you want from the presentation. But that chart hasn't changed at all in any of the discussions. Just who's applied to the tiers is the only thing that's changed.
can I suggest this? And I'd be interested in everybody's input on this, starting with Mary as vice chair, and perhaps Helene as former chair. But whether it makes sense to just be very careful with our agenda for next week to get through the zoning things efficiently yet thoroughly, and then line up a bunch of votes. But on the supposition that we're going to have text in front of us on which to vote, if Chris is confident that that's something that can be achieved. Because we're getting put to a point where I understand that the select board wants our input before they vote on certain things, and time is short. We don't see the school committee until the 13th. Our final meeting's on the 15th, and that's, you know, the warrants at the printer at that point, if that were still a thing. So I really think we need to vote a bunch of things a week from tonight. But I'm more comfortable voting on fully realized articles. Chris, do you have any guidance? Mary, Helene, anybody else who's ever chaired another committee, which I haven't done, please. Go ahead, Helene.
I agree with you. I think next Thursday is going to be a longer night, even though tonight wasn't too short, because we have to get more information. I think that we have to have it written down, very specific, what we're voting on and things like that. And Chris, I guess, you know, that would be okay if we come in next Thursday and we just go down that warrant and be able to do that. I think we had a big issue here tonight. I know we did. And it was procedural. It was fairness. It was, you know, I think it's a learning lesson for all of us, including the Water Commission, in turning. What we've tried to do is not have surprises at, you know, this late in the game. And we've done that by advisory and select board working together, and the committee reports being earlier and earlier. And now we need to think about making them earlier and earlier. Part of the problem was COVID. So I'm okay about a really long meeting next week instead of rushing through votes tonight.
Does anyone have Mary, go ahead.
I would just, yeah, I don't feel comfortable at all voting without the actual language of an article in front of me, but I do think that a lot of the legwork has been done, and thank you very much,
Right.
Stephen and Leonora and Jason, for being on the call, and Don. And I think this will be a much easier sell at town meeting too,
Yeah.
and a much simpler story to tell. So as long as we can have supporting documents, I think, in our hands by Tuesday or at the latest Wednesday, and I will certainly make sure that they're distributed. And maybe any questions, we might have to figure out how to do that, but I don't know how much deliberation we would need. So I would think we could check along as long as we have text.
I agree. To me, voting on an empty box is a little like writing a blank check. So does anybody else on the committee have any views to the contrary, or is everybody content just lining this thing up so that, and Mary and I will make every attempt to just have a nice organized set of votes ready to go before the meeting. Jean?
Rob, I don't know if this is preemptive, but since we've been talking about the water rate generally, setting aside the issue of the school funding, does it make sense to even do some preliminary deliberation? So that way, by the time next week, we don't have to, go into all of that, given how packed the agenda is, because I think it might be pretty packed. I mean, with town hall and then sewer and water and zoning, there's a lot. And so I'm just thinking, is there anything left we can do to help check the box, including for the water commission while they're here? And, I don't know if hearing any preliminary deliberations would be helpful or not. Maybe it's just seeing the text and just moving forward.
Well, I think, I certainly want to make sure that everybody in the advisory committee has had a chance to ask questions to the water commissioners that they need to ask. I get the sense that we have. I think, we're past time, but we're not terribly past time. If there's anything that people, I think, want to throw out there in terms of like some preliminary thinking points for folks to mull over between now and next week, I think you're right. I think it makes sense to make that available. So if anybody does want to, if you will, deliberate a little bit, I'll move across the committee, and it might generate a question or two. I don't think we want to go into a feedback loop for another hour. I will tell you that I was with a client, a public board in another town, which shall not be named, and I was in executive session until 1:55 this morning. So we're not doing that. We're not doing that ever. So with that limitation in mind, does anybody have anything they'd like to put out there or otherwise? Helene, then Jean.
I appreciate what Jean had to say. I just want to make sure I'm on. Yeah. But I still would like to wait till next Thursday, so I have everything in writing. And I definitely believe that, just think that Jason and Stephen and Lenora, I'm appreciative for all the work that you all have done for our town. And there's not a lot of wiggle room here. There's not a big delta in terms of what we have for money and what we need to do, and it's really tight, and I get that. It's more of a procedural thing in terms of this year and us not doing things this late in the game. That's how it affects in my brain. But I really do like to. I'm a paper person, so I can look at the numbers, and I'll stay up. I'll try to stay up to 1 a.m. I don't mind doing it. If it's numbers, I love it. And I just like the numbers on a piece of paper and everything down so I could have a proper vote.
Very well. Jean, I think you would, I think at this point, Lenore, we're just sort of doing a little preliminary.
Well, no, I just want to, because Helene was talking about numbers, and if you guys are looking at our budget for the revenue section of it, so that you might have a little understanding of what we can determine is going to actually be there. It's basically, if you have the budget in front of you, hopefully you do, the capital recovery charge is a charge that's there. The hydrant fee, definitely. Yeah. There are 2 different hydrant fees, and basically the rental lease income. The rental lease income is the income we're getting from Verizon and AT&T for having antennas on our water tanks. Other than that, everything else is variable. If you take a look at the actuals from 18, 19, and 20, you could see how the numbers from the budget for liens and system development, they're just guesses. And we always try to estimate low on system development. We don't even put in lines for penalties, water liens, and tax liens. That's sort of icing on the cake.
Okay.
Follow what I'm saying, but just to give you an idea of what you're looking at in the budget. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything further? I think we've sort of hit a conclusion. I think if it's all right with everyone, we'll move on to the remaining agenda items. I think we can thank the water commissioners, and you can stay if you're interested in this other stuff. But
Okay, excuse me. I think I have to adjourn my meeting.
I think you do. That's what I was going to
Yes.
suggest. So it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm going to, what time is it? I don't have a watch on right now.
9:14 p.m.
Okay. I'm going to call an adjournment to our Water Commission meeting at 9:14 p.m. tonight. Do I have a second to this motion?
You have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously voted by Stephen Girardi and Leonora Jenkins. Thank you very much for all your time this evening.
Very
Good night,
well.
folks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
One other
Bye.
note, if anybody ever wants a facilities tour like Ms. Dippold just got last week, feel free to reach
Thumbs
out.
up. It was good, Jason.
It's worthwhile to see what's out there.
I should.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See ya.
Okay, looking at our agenda, our item is discussion of recurring articles and upcoming meetings, which we've already touched on a little bit. Chris, are there any updates about the warrant that you can give us? And
Yes.
go ahead.
So first, there's 2 pending and 1 made amendment to the things that you've already reviewed. It turns out that Brian Joyce just received a bill for maintenance of the tie gate from the company that manages it from last year. I don't know how this got delayed, but it did. So since we already have an unpaid bills from prior years on the warrant, Don is going to validate what it is and whether or not there was any money encumbered for it. And if there wasn't, it'll be added. And I'll have it for you next week because I don't have the number yet confirmed. So that's number 1. Number 2, the supplemental appropriations. Because of a change in the timing of the town hall project, there's some older money that was authorized for borrowing for the last design because it hasn't been tied back to an actual building yet. We have to start an accelerated payment of it. So Don is going to ask for an amendment to the supplemental appropriation article, and it's not changing any actual money. It's just moving it a little bit differently. So there's some debt that's not being paid as aggressively as we thought, and this one just is. So then you can explain that in more depth, and we'll also bring it to you probably next week. That's the plan. The last one is, if you remember the conversation last week about the one-time costs, the question was, why are we doing tennis courts? Why would we do fields? So that question was raised, and the select board said, absolutely. So the new request is for $40,000. And so what I asked Michelle Leary to do was talk to the company that actually does this work. So we go to 40, and it's to assess the creation of courts and fields. So it's both courts and fields. And it would allow us to site as many as 3 new fields. And depending on what we want to study, because it's not just, we know land, it's can we make it work? What about the drainage? What about all that other stuff? And again, as we said before, it's also for the tennis court analysis. So that was the only change.
Those all sound like they won't be terribly time consuming, but I should not talk. Mary, and then I think I saw Jean's hand, and then we'll go around. Go ahead.
So just a quick question, Chris. So that the field/tennis court assessment will encompass all the available town land that could be used for such a purpose? Yes?
Well, yes. Yeah. Well, usable town land. Yes. Not that like forests.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Jean, did I see your hand? Oh,
Mary,
there was somebody else.
Mary literally read my mind. That was obviously it's not going to be Wheelwright Park, but
No.
the existing town land that's out there, including that which is not fields right now, but could be.
Yeah, I think there's a focus, for example, with the softball fields at Deer Hill, there's a possibility of expanding fields there. That would be a very logical place to do it, right by the schools if you can. It would make very little sense to put it in the woods somewhere that we can't get to. But there are some other locations like that have this. and again, so I've made that amendment in the memo that I've prepared, and I'll send you an updated warrant with all of this in it.
Thanks.
I guess you get to do it next week. So the other ones have not changed. The Safe Harbor has withdrawn its request for the alcohol bylaw change, the underage drinking bylaw change. So the warrant is down to 28 articles. So that's good. It's one less article. I actually just got a green light to put the amendments to the Affordable Housing Trust in front of you folks. That bylaw, that language has already been drafted. It's already in the warrant. So that can be on as soon as you want. I just have to make sure that the chairman or the vice chair or members of the board can come to your meeting to present if you have questions about the change of language. And the town hall, I think you've already teed up for next, right? I think it's going to come to you next week, officially back again, and there's actual number now and language, and then it'll go to capital and it'll go to selectmen. That's the plan for that one. And then there's one other that's possible. We've been talking about a bus storage facility. There hasn't been one in town really for, I don't know, 20 years. They've been kind of orphans at the DPW, and now they're orphans over at the baseball fields. So there's been a goal of doing something more permanent with them. And we've also been talking with the alternative energy folks about a proposal that won't happen today, but we're setting this in motion that it could become a green facility with solar buses, with solar powered buses. So we think we might have a location. The select board is going to talk about that next week. And if they think that location is appropriate, we'll jumpstart the process, and you'll be hearing that too. So that's separate. I mean, that may be in the capital plan, but it's not. It's got to be heard separately from all the other things that have been proposed. So it's a little more it's a slightly more complicated proposal, but I can't talk about the details of it.
Okay. Jean, Helene.
So just a quick question, Mary. I know you asked this last week, but in terms of the town hall, when you say they're coming back to us, were they going to present different financing options? We began talking about that, but I think if there's anything out there, including a one-pager, we could see, beforehand, just because there's a lot on the agenda. And to me, that's a critical piece. That really, there just wasn't a lot out there on. I think that would be really helpful, including to have any material beforehand, if at all possible.
I'll certainly reach out to Phil and Mark, and they've been in the last 2 weeks, actually, since they met with capital budget. They have been going through some different iterations and looking at shrinking the floor plan and seeing how they could, does it make sense to do that and so forth. So I think their committee Tuesday evening, I think they're giving it one more week, and this next Tuesday, they will vote on what their recommendation as a committee is for the site, for the plan. And then they'll be able to come forward and have a more robust conversation. So I will get in touch with them so they know, but they'll be ready to recommend something which will then have a real number attached to it and a real plan attached to it and all that.
Okay. Okay, great.
Okay. Helene.
I had a question for Chris. When you said solar, you're just meaning something on top of the covering where the buses are?
Yeah, we could say the thought, and it's something that's in exploration, is to create a solar charge, use solar, a small solar array to power up the electric bus fleet.
So we would actually invest in electric buses?
Potentially, yes. I mean, that's something that it's not, we're not quite there yet. But there's a lot of work being done now to get there. And of course, the first thing we need is a place, regardless if the buses are diesel or natural gas or solar, they need a place to live. And
right.
So,
okay. Because at one point we were thinking about the alternative energy, was thinking about a carport. On top of the carport was going to be solar panels.
I think there's a lot of, I think that's one alternative, Helene. I mean, that's down the road a little bit. The first step is location.
No problem.
There is a location the select board is going to consider next week, and then if they give it a green light, you'll all hear about it next.
Okay.
But
Sounds
it's
good.
nothing that's going to be on this warrant, right, Chris?
No, it will be. This
Would it?
this would move very quickly, potentially,
All right.
providing all of you are good with it. But again,
Okay, then we'll keep, we'll
I just
keep
want you to know
a-
this is out there. I didn't want to surprise you next week. So, oh, by the way, we got something else out there. So
Yeah, we've been critical of surprises, so we should
Yeah.
be consistent. so.
this has been going on for many, many, many months. The other party, which you'll know more about next week, it's been a very long process. So.
Okay, yeah, just keep us advised. Thanks. Mary?
Can we just go over what is on the docket for the joint meeting next Tuesday? So I have some clarity about that.
Oh, God, did we have to post that
It was posted.
tomorrow? Oh,
was
it's been
posted.
posted. That's right. I was ahead.
You
Never
were.
mind. For once. Thanks, Fran. Yeah, it's a very, I mean, our posting is very terse.
Yeah.
It just says it's a joint meeting with these committees. So Chris, I think Mary's question is a good one for all of us to hear the answer to is, you know,
Yeah.
what should we be expecting?
So the capital budget committee is going to be, they've reviewed all the proposals in the draft plan, which is a rather hefty plan. Again, remember, last year we kind of restricted it because of COVID and everything else. So this is a little bit of a catch-up year. There was extra money, there was extra money left in the fund purposely. So while this year will be bigger, it's almost like a year and a half's worth. It's not just a year. So they're voting on their final recommendations on Monday, the 5th. I will see if we can't get you at least a list of projects before that, but you'll be getting their presentation on their recommendations on Tuesday. And there's quite a lot of them, by the way. There's about $3 million worth of projects that are kicking around. And in addition, you'll be getting CPCs. Now, CPCs, I think, is pretty much done, and I'm going to see if I can't get that something all to you, perhaps tomorrow, if not tomorrow, most certainly Monday. They have a whole bunch of recommendations too, and their recommendations total over $1 million. So,
And Chris, I think, aren't they meeting again on Monday to vote on a couple more things?
I believe they are. I think they've done the vast majority of their work, but there may be one or two lingering out. So those are what you'll be hearing. So you're going to be getting fairly lengthy presentations from both of them. And there are at least one of the items on the CPC, and I'm not telling you anything that hasn't been in a public meeting already, is generated some degree of controversy because it involves the second congregational church. It's been recommended, but it was a split vote. And I think on the capital side, I think from my conversation with Michelle, that's moved along pretty well. But there are a number of projects. I think they've been pretty well vetted. So those are the two for next Tuesday. As I was talking to Diane earlier about this, I'm sure if the select board will be in a position to vote on them that night or not, I'm not sure that you would be either. You might want to just take them, absorb them, and vote that following Thursday or next week or the week after or whatever. Or you may even call them in for more comments if you have.
Okay. Mary?
Did we ever ascertain if once we're in a joint meeting, and I realize the timing might be a little tricky, if we could then go into a breakout room?
What we could do is we set up a separate
vote. We're butting up against a lot of voting happening.
So we can't. We can set you up in well. What'll have to happen is what we do with select board. We go into executive session. You'll have to log in and then jump back into another Zoom room. So we can have another meeting. We can have a parallel meeting set up for you that'll be ready to go. And then once you're finished with the joint meeting, you can just jump into that one and continue your meeting in a separate platform.
So Chris, if somebody in your office could post that, because it's going to need a separate Zoom link. Am I right? Because it's going to be a public meeting, so the public will need to have access to it. So I think we probably should have some sort of a posting that says, advisory committee meeting to follow or something.
It'll be a continuation of your meeting, and you'll be looking at. And in fact, you'll effectively, if you want to just limit the topics to CPC and capital, which might be enough.
Even if we just voted those and got them off.
I think so. Because it would be the electronic equivalent of what we did last year when we met at Willicott. We walked down the hallway and had a quick debrief, but we did it in public and we were still within the open meeting law by continuing our meeting in that nice sitting room up in the front of the building. So yeah, if we have it posted so that the public can visit, I think we satisfy the open meeting law, and we could conceivably whack out a couple of votes, which would be a good thing. So is that satisfactory to people?
Yeah.
Good.
We'll get that set up.
Meg, then Helene.
Chris, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for Rob and Mary, but with respect to the second congregational question that CPC is going to bring us, would it be appropriate to circulate the memo from the lawyers to us?
Yeah.
I know I have it, but
Yeah, that's public. So yeah,
Okay.
so what I can ask, I mean, there's a lot of materials here, so we might just send you a link to a lot of this rather than circulate document after document. Actually, applications, all of these projects have applications too, and those already exist. So if I can talk to Justine tomorrow about trying to find a way to have you all be able to get into the links for all of these. They're already they're in Microsoft Teams. They're already in folders. So
okay, great.
and I don't know if any of you know, Rob's giving me a funny grimace, so I don't know if you like Microsoft Teams, but
But we can make it work.
Yeah, I've done it. I could, we can make it happen. So
And I guess just for the sake for the rest of my colleagues here, I'm guessing probably the important document that you're going to want to look at for that conversation with CPC is the memo from Paul Durensis and his, I don't know if it was, Rob's going to make fun of me if I try to use legal words, but it was some sort of legal opinion that was very relevant for the conversation. So
no, I may make fun of you for citing my former partner, but I would
Apologies.
never make fun of you for using legal words.
Well, it's embarrassing since I'm married to an attorney, but I do my best.
Well, no, I think we should, I'm eager to look at that. So yeah, if it can get circulated, and anything we can do to be a little ahead of the curve is good. Because I'm with Mary. I mean, I think we've got this problem where everything is a little telescoped, and no one's comfortable voting without something more definite to vote on, but time is short. So I think we can get some things done on Tuesday. We can get some things done on Thursday, and then we're in the last available week. So, Mary.
Just a quick question for next Thursday's meeting, since we're going through this. So we have the zoning articles that we're going to plow through.
I think we just need to vote on them that night. We just need to be prepared to push on through.
Do you want? I'm actually just sending the town hall folks a quick email reminding them about next Thursday. Do you think you would want them? Just how you want to structure that evening in terms of having zoning or town? I would think town hall would actually be a pretty cursory conversation, not cursory, but shorter than the zoning stuff.
Yes.
You want to?
I've already, and I believe I copied you on it. I already advised the zoning people that we'd have them first, and I think they've already posted. So, I think we can, tell the town hall folks, keep them on text message notice and get them in, so they're not wasting time. Okay. But so no good deed goes unpunished. The one time I actually think ahead, so yeah, and we can go to Helene.
Thank you, Jean, for your amazing notes. Next Tuesday notes, if you can get them out as soon as possible, so I'll be prepared for Thursday. It'd be great, because I had patients who were scheduled, because that was not supposed to be a determined meeting. It was, like last minute, because they didn't want to meet with us. I think it was last week or whatever. So that'll be helpful. And yes, I think it's great that we have the 2 Zoom ins, because I may be able to do the second Zoom in, not the first.
Okay.
I will try.
So, are we satisfied that we've covered what we need to cover? I think we have some minutes, and then we're over, then we're done. So did everybody, Jean, you circulated minutes. Could you identify which meeting that is, and then we'll see if we'll move them and see if anybody has comments. They're the minutes of which meeting?
March 25th.
Okay, I have them in front of me. Does everybody have or have had a chance to look at the March 25th minutes? Is there a motion, and then if there's any discussion? Helene, are you
Do we
moving
accept the meeting, accept the minutes of March 25th?
Okay, Fran spoke up. Do I have a second? Helene, is that a second? That's
Yeah.
number 2. It's a second. Any discussion of these draft minutes?
They were excellent.
Okay, that's the discussion. Anything further? Then roll call vote, as always. Fran Collins.
Aye.
Gene Healy.
Aye.
Lee Jenkins. Lee?
Aye.
Excellent. Helene Lieb.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
I was not present, so I'm abstaining.
Very good. And Rob Hillman is an aye. So Gene, thank you again. And you'll go ahead and cause those to be filed appropriately with the town clerk's office.
Can I say one thing, Rob?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Just one thing.
Yes, certainly.
I just think that I'm very proud of being part of this board, how they acted tonight, because the train was leaving the station and we just halted it because we knew that we needed to, when it came to the Water Commission, we needed to question them on timing. And I think that was really good that we all, how the process, how we get budgets done is as important as the results. Thank you.
Well, thanks for saying that. I think we're just doing our job. So good. All right, we've approved minutes. I do not see any topics not reasonably anticipated unless anybody gets
Motion to adjourn.
Lee, move to adjourn. Second. Okay, we have to vote on that. Fran Collins.
Aye.
Gene Healy.
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Fran did, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, Fran. Aye.
He did now. So
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Helene Lieb.
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman is an aye. So the ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Tuesday.
We're posted for 7 o'clock on Tuesday, and Mary will talk over the weekend to start, if you have time, to start sort of honing what the next couple of weeks look like. And Chris, I'll probably call you in the morning at some point